They had no idea who she was. Imagine a courtroom filled with tension. Officers standing tall, a black woman quietly seated in the back row. Moments later, a confrontation breaks out. A slap echoes across the courtroom. But here's the twist. The woman they tried to silence was no ordinary citizen. She was the judge. Yes, you heard that right. Seconds later, she stood up, walked straight past the officers, and took her rightful place at the bench. The courtroom fell silent. This is a jaw-dropping true story of Judge Tammany, the woman who turned disrespect into justice, right in front of the world. The day respect was tested. It was supposed to be a routine court session at the Fulton County Courthouse in Georgia. The courtroom was packed with lawyers, defendants, and officers waiting for the judge to arrive. Among the crowd, a calm black woman in a professional blazer sat silently in the audience section, flipping through notes. Officers walked by her multiple times, eyeing her but saying nothing. Moments later, one officer stopped. "Ma'am, this section is for legal representatives and court personnel only. You need to leave." She responded respectfully, "I am court personnel." But they didn't believe her. A second officer approached, more aggressively this time, and demanded she exit. She stood her ground and calmly repeated, "I'm the presiding judge today." The officers laughed, and that's when one of them slapped the papers from her hand and pushed her backward. Gasps filled the room. Seconds that changed everything. What happened next would stun everyone in that courtroom. Without raising her voice, the woman stood back up, picked up her notes, and walked straight toward the bench. The courtroom grew quiet. Even the officers froze. She calmly walked past the bailiff, climbed the steps to the judge's chair, and sat down. Then she looked the officers dead in the eye and said, "Court is now in session. I am Judge Tammany." The entire room went silent. You could see the shock hit the officers' faces as the realization sank in. The very woman they had just disrespected and assaulted was the one holding all the power in that courtroom. The hidden layers behind the slap. Judge Tammany's story isn't just about a courtroom. It's about the assumptions people make, especially about black women in positions of power. Judge Tammany was the first black woman appointed to that particular courtroom, a proud milestone in her career. She'd worked her way up from public defense attorney to prosecutor, then to judge, a journey that took over a decade of dedication and excellence. But in a matter of seconds, her presence was questioned just because of how she looked. The officers never asked for her ID. They never checked the docket. They assumed, and that assumption led to public embarrassment, not for her, but for them. Judge Tammany's powerful response. Most people would have lost their cool, called for arrests, demanded immediate apologies. But Judge Tammany did something more powerful. She let the system speak. After establishing order, she addressed the courtroom with composure and clarity. She said, "Today was a reminder that authority and respect are not always given equally. But I sit here not to punish. I sit here to serve justice." The officers were visibly shaken. One even tried to leave, but the judge ordered them to stay. Instead of pressing charges immediately, she requested an internal investigation and insisted that the court be an example, not of revenge, but of accountability. Her grace stunned everyone. The story quickly went viral. News outlets picked it up, headlines read, "Black woman slapped by police." Turns out she was a judge. Public opinion was swift. Protests broke out demanding better training for officers, not just in law enforcement, but in basic human decency and racial awareness. The officers involved were suspended pending investigation, and one eventually resigned. But more importantly, Judge Tammany became a national symbol, not for what happened to her, but for how she handled it. She didn't yell. She didn't retaliate. She simply stood up, took her seat, and let justice do the talking.